Hello and welcome to Mostly Minnesota Music Podcast Edition. I'm Ann Tracy. I'm here with my co-host,
Heather Baker.
Yes, and we are here with Elisha Marin. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, I'm excited. You have a debut album coming out, Shining Out on June 18th. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, this is my first record, and it's been a long time coming, so I'm really excited to release this.
Awesome, because you are very active in the arts community in many different ways. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this first album.
Sure. So I am a musician, of course, but a visual artist as well. And I direct an arts nonprofit in Albert Lea, Minnesota called the Freeborn County Arts Initiative. And it's a really collaborative grassroots organization that is located in a former 1916 opera house, which was built as a marriage proposal and has international art, music, and political historical connections. I'm really passionate about old buildings and art history too. So the Freeborn County Arts Initiative has visual arts exhibitions, virtual open mic nights that we've been holding throughout the pandemic, and a podcast that's kind of fun called Art Watch. So this is kind of interesting. I'm used to being on the other side of this whole thing, interviewing people. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this stuff.
I listened to some of the podcasts and I was seriously intimidated by the quality of your voice. I thought, oh my God, he's got such a nice voice.
Thank you. That means a lot. I know that there are a lot of podcasts out there right now, and hosting one was not something that I ever expected to do. But once we decided to start doing it, you learn a lot doing this. And it's really, really interesting hearing your own voice and seeing your face in the editing process. You get to pick up on a lot of those Midwestern patterns of speech and kind of, work on.
You betcha.
Yeah, absolutely. My big one is saying for instead of fur.
That's fun.
Yeah, but thank you. That's artwatch.u for anyone who's interested. We interview working artists, so they've been anyone from a scenic designer, a friend of mine, Tom Butch, who was the senior art director at Disneyland for many years. The last one was Olivia Blinn, who is a globetrotting photographer, UN aid worker. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, you guys do a lot of interesting things. I noticed there was a more visual artist, I think, competition to promote masking.
Yeah, so we shut down the gallery voluntarily for most of 2020 and pivoted pretty early on to digital programming. And because we're a small organization, really young, engaged, and diverse board of directors, we were able to introduce some shows, one of them being Masker Pieces, which, kind of took on the issue of masking in the pandemic head on. We have a show that just opened up on Thursday last week and will run till the end of June, which is the Solitude Movies by Suzanne Crane, who is a very close friend of mine, sponsored by the Minnesota State Arts Board. And that shows a reflection on the ups and the downs of 2020 through 2020 oil or acrylic paintings. It's really, really beautiful. And both of you, Ann and Heather, are invited to come down.
Nice, because it is an actual, because you just opened at the beginning of this month. I mean, you really just opened last week, didn't you?
Yeah, we reopened. Yeah, which was really, really a good thing for us. It was a little surreal having people in the gallery again, having lights on. And I'm actually sitting in one of our artist studio spaces right now. We have a series of artist studios geared at getting emerging artists engaged with the professional business community downtown in a beautiful studio. So they're each themed. This is the arts and crafts themed studio with the Bradbury wallpaper, and we have one that's retro, one that's shabby chic, and my own studio is a little art deco, which I enjoy.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, since you just opened up, are you going to continue with the podcast too? Or was that kind of your pivot for COVID and being closed, but will you carry it on?
Yeah, so we're pursuing a hybrid approach. One of the things that we have done that's been really successful for us was hosting a series of virtual open mic nights where we opened it up and I had people from Los Angeles and Nashville and Minneapolis and the surrounding areas here submit videos, performances, and we cut them together and then rebroadcast and did an open mic night that everybody could participate in and everybody could have access to. And so we're going to be going forward with a bit of a hybrid approach because the internet really allows a level of accessibility that you just can't have. We can have 6,000 views on a podcast, but we can't fit 6,000 people into our gallery for an open mic night. So it's been a learning process, a big learning curve. But I'm really proud of how we adapted to that and how necessary the arts are for people who are shut in their apartments and their houses, dealing with a really negative news cycle quite often. Being able to create things that can enrich people's lives through the arts, through music or visual arts, virtual open mic nights, documentary screenings, things like that. It's a meaningful thing for a lot of people. So I'm really grateful to be able to have an impact in that capacity.
I was going to say, I'm going to take a lyric from one of your songs from the notice of, I'm evicting you from my headspace, all the negative to allow your open mic and all that. I love that line.
Yeah, thank you.
It seems to be fitting for your kind of pivoting and allowing us to enjoy something rather than, let all the other stuff come in our space and take over there.
Yeah, it's really necessary when the world seems pretty dark to focus on the positive things in life. There's always negative in the world that you can look at and be discouraged by. And there are things that, of course, happen that we have no control of. But there are things that happen that we do. And, if you can influence your immediate surroundings and be a force for good for the people who are in your life, that's a really positive and worthwhile thing to do. So that's my philosophy, and that's my philosophy behind this album as well. The title track, "Shining Out," it's a song of hope. It's a song of it's an optimistic song, and I that's really my heart in sharing this music.
Well, you've pulled optimism from a unique inspiration for that song.
Yeah, so "Shining Out" was written in response to the Charleston church shooting in 2015, which was a really, really dark day in our country's history. It was a racially motivated killing, and it happened at a time when we were seeing, several of these incidents happening daily, and that one really struck home to me because I quite literally was living in a historic church building at the time. It felt like if this could happen in a religious space, that
Yeah.
where are you safe in America? And I was watching the news broadcast that night, and this was at the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, and there were police and paramedics and caution tape and flashing lights from first responders. But there was this light that was in the background of the shot during the press conference, and I needed to see that. I think that despite all the darkness that was in the world at the time, there was still light that was shining out and quite really light in the window, which is how that song opens. I can see a light in the window and it's shining out.
That's amazing. I mean, I wouldn't have thought of it being so literal, and that, which of course then leads signage to the figurative. I love that. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of that in my songwriting. I really enjoy writing with layers of meaning. And my favorite kind of poetry or literature or expression, when it comes to songwriting, any sort of creative writing like this, is when you can say pretty overtly what you mean without saying it overtly. You can kind of dance around the subject in an artistic way, in a poetic way. And if you're careful with your references, you can be a little literal with that and still have your underlying meaning come through. So I appreciate that observation.
Well, and it's really the artist's eye. I don't have an artist. I might not have seen it that way.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the visual art and the music do go hand in hand. A lot of my visual art, I'm a designer, so I really enjoy print design in particular, making words look, rooted in some maybe historical fashion or in some application that's unique or interesting. And I designed, for those of you who will get the physical version of this disc, I know it's hard to see on here, but I designed the packaging and the liner notes for this, and I'm pretty
Nice.
proud of that.
Nice. We've seen pictures. It is beautiful. It's striking. But
Thank you. Means a lot.
how nice for you to be able to take control of all of that.
Yeah, take control of it is one interpretation, I guess. One thing that I'm self-taught, and one thing that a lot of self-taught artists really have to come to terms with is the role of necessity in their artwork. Something has to be done, and they don't have the resources or the skills or the equipment or whatever it takes to get to that point. And if you're a self-starter, if you're somebody who's driven and wants to get something done and it needs to be done, you just figure out how to do it. And my interview with my dear friend Tom Butch started off with him just kind of by chance walking into a high school theater audition, and through that ended off getting involved with theatrical performances in college. He painted the backdrop at the Chanhassen Dinner Theater that became the backdrop for Prince's Sign of the Times album.
Oh,
With
wow.
the street lights.
That's great.
And yeah, and eventually got into film and TV, and later a really sweet job at Disney, all being self-taught. Whenever there was a need to do something, he just figured out how to do it and it done. And it's a really interesting thing. I wrote all the songs on this record. I have a really good set of collaborators, just a brilliant team. Matt Patrick, the producer of the Library Studio.
Library. It's very good.
And I'm sure you're familiar with his work. Aaron Fabrini is on bass, upright, and pedal steel. He has a really, really gorgeous solo on Love is a Luxury, which is a really a favorite tune of mine. And then Zach Miller, who is a teacher. He does percussion on the record, and he's worked with the Duluth Symphony Orchestra and has taught for many years. And Alyssa Klein, who flew up from Nashville and did vocals on the record. So when you have a good set of collaborators, it can take your ability and your talent and all of that stuff put together, and bring it so much further than any one person could ever do.
That's absolutely true. If I work with someone, and I'm sure it's not originally her line, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, bring people with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's,
Yeah, collaboration is a really, really powerful thing.
yeah. So Love is a Luxury, you mentioned that song, and that's I like that song as well. It feels like a lighter song in the sonically, maybe but the Love is a Luxury I thought I might not ever see. And I like that line because it does make love seem like not a necessity, but an additive.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm a romantic. Maybe not a hopeless, but maybe a hopeful
Hopeful.
romantic. Um, and that song, it's a short tune, and it's really, I think, my showcase of some elegance in songwriting. Um, so the song starts off with a line that was actually given to me, dreamt up quite literally by a friend of mine, Suzanne Crane, who has a show in the gallery across
You
the hall
just
from
mentioned,
me.
yeah.
Um, she uh, came up to me one day and said, "I dreamt that you wrote this really beautiful song, and I'm so sorry. I had more of it when I woke up, but all I can remember is something like, oh God, I love the sound of my language on her tongue. I'm sorry. From then on, I can't remember." And I said, "Okay, that's nice. I'm going to take that if you don't mind. I'm going to borrow from myself from you, Dream." And I went home and picked up my guitar and threw a capo on it and just started playing and singing that line. And I wrote the song in 3 minutes. It just all came out, which is a really, really kind of surreal, special thing. And that's not the only song on this record that happened that way. I wrote this album over a very long period of time. My Girl, which is another one of my favorites. It's another kind of fingerpicky love song. I wrote that 10 years ago. I was
Wow.
just out of high school, and um, I've got 12 songs in this album and wrote them over a 10-year span. Um, it took me a little while to come to terms with myself as a musician. I didn't consider myself a musician for a while, which I realize is not, wasn't really grounded in anything. I didn't consider myself a visual artist for a long time. But there are things that you have to go through that build your belief in yourself, and kind of coming to terms with recording this music, finding the right people. Um, I grew up in kind of a like an isolated world, if that makes sense. Quite literally in rural Minnesota, which is really detached from the rest of everything that's happening in the world. Um, and so I just, again, I'm a self-taught musician as well, self-taught songwriter. Um, a lot of this album is a really personal reflection of myself. A lot of the songs are quite literal in some ways, which is fun. Um, so it really did take some convincing of myself to finally record this, and I'm really lucky to have the 12 songs that I have, and I'm just exceedingly proud of the production and the collaborative work that everybody brought to the table helping make this happen.
Can I back to when Susan gave you the line for Love is a Luxury? When she heard it, did she say, "Yes, that's it"?
I think that it was something probably like that. I think that when you take something that comes from the dream world, and if that's a spiritual place or if that's a very physical place in your brain, I'm not sure. But when you take that and bring it into the real world, I don't think it's ever 100% the same. Um, but I think it was probably pretty close to what she had dreamt about. And she does like the song. I don't know if it's her favorite or not, but it might be one of well, it's in my top 12 for sure.
Nice. I was just going to say that I find that fascinating because usually you would think you would put your own, you know, what you're going through and doing rather than, oh, I dreamt this up and it was yours. I don't know. I love that. I was going to say, I love the tune Respite Baby. It kind of had a Leon Bridges vibe to me. And I was just, I don't know. Can you tell me about that one? I love that one.
Sure. What do you like about that song, Heather?
Just the feel of the horns and the movement. It has like a shaken movement type of thing. And the lyrics, but I think it's more of the big band kind of sound too. Just got my attention.
Yeah, so that's a groovier tune. You know, some of my songs are a little folky, and this is one of the higher energy songs. It was written towards the end of a relationship, a long-term relationship where, you know, you just feel like you need a break, and I feel like it's applicable to people who have been living, you know, a year in some sort of lockdown as well. And that song, when we approached the production of it, I brought it to Matt, and I had written it in a major key, and it never, you know, I had taken these songs, I'd toured with these songs, I'd performed them hundreds of times, and I had really taken them as far as I could get them. And I liked that song, but there was something about it that just wasn't perfect yet, wasn't right yet. And Matt listened to it a couple times, and he kind of sat back in this really kind of interesting mid-century modern bent plywood chair that he has in his studio. And he said, let's try that again. Can you do it in a minor key? And I thought, oh my God, it just blew my mind. This was a song that I was really familiar with playing. You know, I had muscle memory, you know, in my hands and in my voice for how to sing this song. And we switched it to a minor key. And the character of the song fell into place from there. We took a few ideas for the inspiration for the production approach from some of Michael Kiwanuka's recent stuff, which is a little, you're touching on the Leon Bridges stuff, a little retro.
Well, I had both of those too, so that's funny that you said it. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
So it's a little retro influenced. You know, it might harken back to some things that you'd hear in the late '60s, early '70s. But yeah, that's a really fun tune to play. It's
and
cathartic.
Eric Clapton written down.
Because
I'm older than either of you.
I have a question now that you said, or you were playing in major, and then he said try minor, and I know this is, you know, songs and a new album, but now if you've been writing or something, do you think like, I can tweak it that way? Like, does it, you know, do you want to keep shoving it the way in a box, trying to make it fit like it was, or when you're doing it, or will you kind of think that way of switching something? Or I guess, you know, it's easy to say outside of it because Michael didn't, or Matt didn't have the vision that you did, but I'm just wondering if it kind of makes your tool house get bigger in that aspect.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much, I guess I didn't anticipate how much I would learn in the production process. That was a really significant effort for me. You know, I performed these songs a lot, and you know, some of them I got to live with for a decade. And when you are so used to playing songs like that, especially songs that you haven't heard anybody else perform because it's your own work, or if you have heard somebody sing it, it's, you know, not something that's recorded that you can listen to on the radio or on Spotify. it's a really interesting personal process to go through. There are some ego checks there. For example, I brought one song to Matt that I was really proud of, and I was playing through my catalog. I brought a binder over and was we were choosing the songs that we were going to produce, and I gave a really what I felt was a really strong performance of a song that I really liked, and he kind of nodded his head and said, "Well, I think that one's probably worth fighting for to keep it on the record." Um, and you just if you want to go to the next step or whatever, you do have to let go sometimes of the ruts that you've worn for yourself, and it's really easy to happen in so many different ways in your personal life. Creatively, though, when you have stories behind your work or some ego attachments to things, it's a big exercise in being flexible minded and in trusting other people's knowledge and experience and abilities to let them help you. And um, that was really a fantastic personal experience for me. I grew a lot as a person, as a musician, as an artist. I learned a lot, and now when I write, there's plenty of options that are on the table. But I guess the advantage that I have is that I don't have ruts that I've worn in new music that I'm working on, and that can go in a few different directions for you. But I can't wait to write songs, beyond these 12. We actually finished production of this album at the very beginning of 2020 and had the first release scheduled for April 25th, 2020. And we all know that we entered a pretty major period of world history around that same time. My first release show was canceled, and we waited and rescheduled for August 2020, and still didn't feel right about having any sort of in-person event. So we scheduled a series of music video shoots, and I'd been biking a lot and getting out in the sun, getting ready for video, which is a pretty intensive thing. I wanted to look good, I wanted to feel good, have my energy up, and I set out at the beginning of August on a bike trip that I was really excited about. And Anne and Heather, out of maybe 100 plus bike rides that year, it was the only day for some reason I had like long sleeves on, long pants, and I had just been given as an early birthday present a pair of biking gloves. And I always wear a helmet, of course, but I went out that day on my new bike, and I was going pretty quick. And in the middle of the day, about noon, a raccoon ran out of the underbrush at the state park and charged my bike just in the blink of an eye. It came out and attacked the front tire of my bike and sent me flying. I jettisoned, landed headfirst on the asphalt and skid for a little while. And I had passed an SUV that was driving on the trail really, really slowly, and flipped myself over and was laying there on the concrete, and they came up and called the paramedics to come pick me up, and I was picked up in a backboard, having just landed on my head, and I had crushed my collarbone and broken it in 3 places. And this was 12 hours after we had scheduled our slate of music video shoots for the second release. So April, we have the first release shut down with a pandemic. August, try to release it and completely waylaid in the worst pain of my life, unable to get out, in and out of bed, tie my shoes, dress myself.
Oh,
I had surgery about a month later and spent, the rest of the summer indoors. Got very pale. Was in a really considerable amount of
oh,
pain, but got connected with a wonderful sports surgeon from the Mayo Clinic in Austin,
nice.
Minnesota, who put me back together, and I can do everything I could before. Thankfully, miracle. Cracked my helmet all the way through,
Jeez.
ground a big portion of it off. Um, so the third time the charm. Hopefully, my fingers are crossed. So we're looking at June 18th, 2021, for a official release. And at this point, we're starting to reopen, and we're getting into spring now. People are feeling good again. So I can't wait for people to hear it finally. 10 years of waiting in the writing stage, and then over a year of waiting for the pandemic to end and me to heal again, get healthy enough
I
to
was
release
gonna
it.
say you're probably gonna have a really good song out of that experience.
Yeah, the Ballad of the Raccoon and the Bike. Mhm.
I can't wait to hear that one.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you know. You'll be the first to hear it.
I was gonna say you could even have a really good video with that too, with the song pair
Yeah, we'd have
with
to do
it.
stop motion animation or something. I'm not willing to do the stunts on that one.
Yeah, no. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Wow.
Yeah, well, the thing is, life is really unpredictable. You get thrown curveballs whether you like it or not. Sometimes people throw themselves curveballs, but the best thing that you can do is just be as prepared as you can. And you know what? That takes some of the stress of life off, you know. And I just can't tell you enough. I can't wait for people to hear it. And getting some feedback from you, and hearing what your favorite tunes are, and what references it sparks in your mind is really, really great to hear.
And you've done such an amazing job highlighting other artists in this time. You must just be chomping at the bit. I mean, just
Yeah. So I did not consider myself a musician for a long time, even though I was actively performing. I was actively writing new music. And it took a lot of self building to get up to the point where I could record. And now I'm just really to the point where I'm ready for this. You've got to commit to it, and I'm just ready to perform these songs, and I'm ready to play music with the really wonderful people that I got to record with. It's one of the really good things in my life.
when you have an amazing team with you, and you speak to it, just talking about your experience with Matt Patrick and changing the key and all of that, and then you've told us that you really self-taught musician and songwriter. When you were growing up, when you were a baby songwriter and musician, did you have a community around you then, or was this it's kind of a singular self-taught experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I was raised in a very, very religious household, and not just broadly religious, but very exceedingly strict form of Christianity, um, where even listening to what was considered secular music or non-Christian music was
Hmm.
not allowed. And that really, for somebody who is artistic and somebody who um, loves life and creative expression, cutting off a big part of like the human soul, it's a really unhealthy thing to do. So I had started writing music, but I didn't have the benefit of knowing what folk music sounded like, or um, really how any of this was supposed to work or supposed to sound. or anything. I just started writing music that I wanted to hear. And I think my senior year of high school, I heard Woody Guthrie for the first time and blew my mind.
I was
I
like,
loved it. Yeah, yeah, it was just a really wonderful thing. And thankfully, I was able to kind of deprogram myself and come clean of that dogma I was raised in, and I just found happiness. I found a really solid sense of self and interconnectivity with others. Albert Hubbard, who's one of my favorite writers, he lived about 100 years ago. He's an influence in the arts and crafts movement in America, a suffragist, and just a good forward-thinking person. He said, the law gives us our family, but thank God we can choose our friends. And I've built here with, the wonderful people I have in the Freeborn County Arts Initiative and other friends, and I've built my spiritual family, my like soul connection. But I didn't have the benefit of being able to take lessons or have music to listen to as reference, so that isolation was a tough thing for me to overcome. Um, but you know, because of that, have learned a really strong reliance on other people, good-hearted people who operate in good faith and can help you, advance yourself and a common goal.
I can see when you say that some of the songs are overtly what you mean with Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
I have a whole new understanding of that song for you now.
Yeah. What was your interpretation of that?
Well, what I really liked about it was, and I come from a very different religion. I come from a million years of Catholic school, but not a particularly religious upbringing, which is, so I come back from a very different angle. But just the questioning of it and the questioning of it, and really, I thought that if I have questions now, will I have them in heaven? That line struck me so much because I can.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I mean, I think you always bring yourself to when you listen to a song, so of course I'm bringing my, you know talking to the sisters as they're telling me to be shush, it's like, well, but will it get answered? I just really like that. I just really like the question about it. It made me really think about, yeah, it's that still stays with you if you've been brought up with some of that, I thought. So
Yeah. And, it's different people in different ways. Some people need that structure and find answers in um, that way of thinking and way of life. And for other people, they need to find their own path. And I guess I'll come clean. Both of my parents were pastors, are pastors, I should say. And I grew up, with a firsthand experience of that world and that life. And Heavenly Father is a reflection on my spiritual journey, and it ends with, "O Lord, is it blood or is it wine? O Lord, is it yours or is it mine?" And speaking of the Catholic schooling, I taught for 5 or 6 years at a Catholic school teaching music and art. And at the end of Shining Out, you can hear on the last chorus, there's a whole bunch of voices that kind of chime in. And those are about 100 students and close friends of mine who all gathered around microphones in the pre-pandemic days and added their voices to that song to make it a big, all-encompassing, very humanity-oriented choir.
I love it. I think that's great. I think that, yeah, we were taught much more of a God is within you, which I think you had such a gift, and for your to not be able to let shine fully growing up would be uh, you know, would obviously feel frustrating. I mean, it would just, it is. It
Yeah,
has given you some patience that is now serving you well with this album coming out for the third time.
yeah. And what can you do? Nobody was expecting this. We knew that a pandemic would happen at some point. It's
Yeah.
just it's life on Earth, you know. Um, but you can choose to either, feel really betrayed by fate, or just do your best to accommodate that. And I just really hope that it can speak to people and impact their life in a positive way.
I think it will. I'm just getting one last message because the USPS is another song that I, partially because I have sent more postcards in the last year trying to save the post office, but I love the old fashioned sound of it, and I love the imagery of that one too. I just like
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for a little folk music. And
Thank you.
goes
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
So this is oh my gosh, my batteries on my camera just died. Can we pause the recording really quick?
Sure.
Sorry about that.
All right. So we had a little technical glitch on my end there. USPS, tell us about, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So USPS is another fingerpicky folk love song, and it describes a relationship that uses an intermediary, which is the United States Postal Service. And that one features Alyssa Klein, who is a dear friend from Nashville. And Heather, you had mentioned seeing a performance of mine in Los Angeles, or seeing a video of our performance, I should say. And I met Alyssa Klein my first time out in LA in 2017. And we were both at a singer-songwriter showcase in Costa Mesa, California, at the Wayfarer. And Alyssa got up and just absolutely blew me away with this perfect, just golden clear voice. And we've been good friends ever since. So she was able to fly up, I think in February 2020, and recorded some background vocals on a few of the songs. She makes an appearance on Respite Baby as well, and Stone Heart of Mine. But USPS also features the geniusly talented Matt Patrick on mandolin. He plays, I think he has 20 instrument credits on the album. He plays everything from electric guitar to something he calls the guitar writer, which is some sort of Japanese instrument. If you don't, you need to follow the library studio on Instagram. He has a recurring series, a web show called Unusual Instruments, where he goes through the kind of strange and odd instruments that are in his studio and has some demos of them and talks about the history, and it's a really fun thing. And when I approached Matt about producing this album, I gave him a pass to do whatever he felt we should do with the music. I obviously had taken the songs as far as I could, and I had an idea of what they should be, but I also knew that Matt has so many options in his head of what's possible that I didn't know. So he really went all out with the production of this album. And Aaron and Zach as well just did some incredible things. Heavenly Father features Zach Miller doing some really, you can tell his background from the Duluth Symphony Orchestra comes through in his arrangement of the percussion on that song. But he plays the inside of a toy piano on that song as well. There's just so many things that are roped in. And when we recorded the instrumentation for this one, we had 6 songs that we recorded the beds for in one day. We got there at 8 in the morning and left at 5. And Matt had his studio set up like a musician's playground. It was really amazing. He had all these instruments laid out that were mic'd and connected and turned on and ready to go. And they would come into the control booth, play the demo of the song, listen to it a couple times. We'd recorded the scratch tracks previously, and they'd talk about it, listen to it again, and after 2 listens of a song for the first time, would go back into the studio and compose, and wrote everything within 3 or 4 takes, and then added some auxiliary instrumentation to that. And the collaborative energy in the studio was just absolutely brilliant. Matt picked up his guitar and plugged it in, and they just wrote these really elegant, really well thought out, parts for this album spontaneously. And we had a beautiful lunch. We just had a wonderful, really memorable time, and it's something that I think I'll cherish for a very long time.
Something you can do again after this one comes out.
I cannot wait. Yeah.
And you know what? That gets us back to, so it's coming out on June 18th, but people can order, they can do pre-orders.
Yeah, so shiningout.net is the website I have set up for this project. And you can pre-save the album on Spotify. You can pre-order on iTunes. All of that is really helpful. The more albums we sell, the faster I can get onto the next one.
Nice. And I will include all of this in the notes too, of course. But for folks who are listening, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram at Elisha Marin, which is ELISHA MARIN. My website is shiningout.net and elishamarin.com. I'm also on Facebook as well, but links to all that can be found on the website.
Nice. Well, we are excited for people to listen to it too. You've got a lot there. It's been fascinating to hear the stories behind the songs, because as you say, you really do say a lot. Now I know you have told many of the stories very overtly, but in a way that is still surprising to hear the backstory.
Yeah, music is a little a Rorschach test. Sometimes you see what you want to see, and I love having some room for other people's interpretation in my songs. I'm a little hesitant sometimes to share my meaning or my intention or interpretation in writing a song, because I just love so much hearing feedback on what it means to people, because your artwork or your music has a few layers of meaning in itself, and what it means for you is just the opinion of one person. It's just you, and that's a unique thing that both the artist and the observer can have, and that's my favorite part of the artistic process, when somebody can see your work, have a reaction to it, form their opinion about it, and have that. That's a unique facet of that artwork in itself, and it's maybe my favorite part of this whole thing.
It's unique and it's dynamic, because what I think about it on a Tuesday may be different than on Friday, and what I think about it now may be different than what I think about it 10 years from now.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And some of the songs have meaning that in my mind is pretty overt, but it's hard for me to choose a favorite from this album. I have some songs that get stuck in my head at different times of the week, and we did a little bit of market research trying to figure out what we would release a single, what single would it be. And so I sent the album out to a few people and had a form for them to fill out and let me know what their favorite was. And there was no consensus.
Oh.
I didn't get a clear picture of what people would like to hear, which I guess is a good thing. But when you're trying to figure out, are you going to release a single? What single is that going to be?
Yeah.
Not helpful. So
No.
And do you have a favorite song on this?
I think it really might be the USPS. That might be my favorite one. I did like, I'm going to say I won't. I liked a lot of the others too, but I you know, and I know it's from personal experience. I know it's,
Yeah.
I was
because I
going to
used
say, yeah, I think you are hitting across the board because that is not, mine was the notice. I like shining out and respite, baby.
And those songs don't really have a whole lot in common. So your tastes are pretty
Nope.
diverse. Yeah, the notice, of course, is played on an old 1930s Gibson archtop with a sad old-timey country dobro in the background. Shining Out is really, hopeful and a little gospel-y, and Respite Baby is a little groovy and rocky. That's fun. Thank you for sharing that with me.
something for everyone. So
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Elijah. Thank you so much for telling us your story and sharing your music with the world. And we too look forward to when we can talk about this to more people and they will know what we're talking about. So that's
Wonderful.
great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, Anne and Heather, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Means a lot.
Thank you.